Welcome back. In this video we're going to be tweaking our gameplay a little bit to be a bit more interesting, and I think the first thing we're going to do is we're going to change the way our cacti spawn. So if you remember, if we look at the prefab spawner from last time, what we do is we have basically a spawn rate and a random delay, and every time the spawn rate passes, we instantiate a cacti, and then we generate a new time or a next time to spawn by using the spawn rate and a bit of a random delay. And currently in our game, if we switch back to our cactus spawn point, we're basically spawning a cactus one every second with a random delay of 3. Now, whilst this works, it's pretty boring. The cacti are, they just basically keep coming, and there's quite a lot of variance in there, so it's a little unfair to the player. And also, they don't speed up or anything, so there's not much challenge to the game once you either figure out what it's doing, or there is the game gets too frustrating because you basically just die with a jump that you can't actually complete. So what I had in the published game that you would have seen on the website and on the Android store was when I pretty much had some code in here that would, as the game progressed, it would gradually reduce the spawn rate and the amount of random delay. So basically the game will get faster as it goes on. However, I believe I've hit upon a better way, and that's what I'm going to show you today. And this way is going to allow us to more accurately control when and how the game spawns, and lets us visually edit how we'd like the cacti to spawn. So what we're going to do that is we're going to add a public variable of type animation curve, and we're going to call this spawn curve. And if we switch back to Unity and pick on our cactus spawn point, we will now see that we've got this field here in the inspector called spawn curve. If we double click on that, we land up with this curve editor, and what it has is it has values from 0 to 1 on the y-axis and from 0 to 1 on the x-axis. And what we can do here is we can double click to create a point on here, and then we can create another point there and say another point there, and we can basically edit a curve. And using the curve animator, what you can do is, for any given value of x, from a value of 0 to 1, it will return a value of y, or return a value based on the y position of this line. So what we can do is we can use this in our spawning system to kind of control how our cacti are spawned. So for instance, as the game progresses, the spawn rate, or the amount of time between each cacti being spawned, can get shorter and shorter. So we'll just leave that like that for the moment. I might just drag that somewhere to like over there, and we'll close that down there. And we see we've got a little representation of our graph over there. So if we go back to our editor now, we need to actually use this graph in our spawning code. So if we jump back to the code here, what we're going to do is we need to map that value from the value of 0 to 1 to the length of the game, or some amount of time. And so what we're going to do is we're going to map that to a time in seconds, and that will allow us to, as the game progresses, look up the appropriate delay that we want for our spawn time based on this curve. So in the code, we're going to create a new public float, and we're going to call this curve length in seconds, and we're going to default that to 30. Whoops, to 30. All right, and so what we're going to do is by default we're going to say that entire length of the curve here is we want that to take place over a 30-second period, which pretty much means that at the start at 0 seconds we're going to be spawning a cacti every 1 second. At 15 seconds in, because that'll be halfway through, we'll be at the halfway point at 0.5 over here, and we'll be then spawning a cacti just at every 0.7 seconds, and then by the time we get down to 30 seconds have passed at the 1 mark, we'll basically be spawning a cacti just all the time. So that's currently what we want that, how that curve will be interpreted with this value. So to do that, we've got to map the curve to this value here in time. And so what we need to first do is figure out how much time has passed. So what we'll do is we're going to create a private this time, float called start time. And then in our start method, which gets called when this the prefab spawner gets created, we're going to set the start time equal to the current time of the game. So effectively, we'll be able to now know how much time has passed since the prefab spawner was created. And now what we need to do is update our logic inside here. So when we need to calculate our next spawn time, instead of using the old formula, we're going to use a new one that uses the curve. So inside here, we're going to create a local variable. We're going to call it curve pos, and we're going to calculate our position on the curve, which is that value between 0 and 1. And we're going to do that by taking the current time and subtracting the start time. So effectively, we'll now have a number which is the number of seconds that have passed since, and a fractional number as well, the number of seconds that have passed since the prefab spawner was created, and then we're going to divide that by curve length in seconds. So we're effectively going to say if our curve length in seconds is 30, we're going to take how many seconds have passed, divide that by 30, and that will give us effectively a value between 0 and 1, which is our position along the curve. Now, because our curve is only going to be from 0 to 1, once we get past 30 seconds, we're going to start getting a value that's higher than 1. So we kind of want to cap that. So what we're going to say here is if curve pos is greater than 1, and I'm using an if there because it is a floating point number, then we want to set the curve pos equal to 1, and we're going to reset the start time. Start time equal to time.time. So what this will do for us is if we go past the edge of the graph ending at 1, we're basically going to pin it for this frame at 1 and then reset the start time so that the next time we come through again, 0 or only less than just over 0, just some point just past 0 seconds will have passed because we've reset the start time, and then we'll effectively wrap back to the start of the curve. What that will do in effect for us is as that curve plays, it'll basically play through once and then restart. So if you can imagine the game, we're going to make it get faster and faster and faster, and then it's going to slow down again and then get faster, faster, faster. So it's going to kind of create the cacti are going to kind of get spawned in waves, basically speeding up and then slowing down and speeding up and then slowing down over and over again. Now once we've got our position on the curve, what we actually have to do is calculate our next spawn time. So what we're going to say is our next spawn time is equal to the current time, and we're now going to call our spawn curve, which is our animation curve that we defined at the top here, spawn curve. And a spawn curve has a method on it called evaluate. And what we do here is we pass in a value, basically the position on the curve the horizontal axis on the graph, and we're going to pass in curve pos, which is that value that we've calculated, which will be some value between 0 and 1. And also, just to clean things up, we no longer need our spawn rate or our random delay anymore. All right, so if we jump back into Unity and just remove those other variables, and we can see our curve here. What I might just do is I might just disable the bunny, so we can just concentrate on the cacti being spawned. So if we run that, we can basically see them being 1 second apart, and as time progresses, you'll see that they get closer and closer together. Not hugely obvious, a little bit there, but we can go and adjust our curve to make that a bit more obvious. So if we go to our curve here, we're going to say it's going to start there and then drop quite quickly down to there. You can right click on one of these and change it to free smooth. That gives 2 little handles here, so we can basically do that. Alright, so it should drop quite rapidly all the way down to 1 every 0.1 seconds. So if we run that, we see they start there and they rapidly get closer and closer together until we're spawning lots of them. And if we give it 30 seconds, it should, they're totally all on top of each other now. That's a wall of cactus. Give it 30 seconds, should hopefully reset itself any moment now. There we are, and then we're back as the curve got reset, and then it starts speeding up again. Cool, so clearly this is not what we want from a game point of view, because that is entirely too speedy. So if we put these back at 1 and maybe pin it at something like 0.4 of a second. All right, let's have a look what that looks like. So here we go. And then it should start speeding up towards the end of the curve. And we're looking at these gaps are really quite small for the player, so it's rather unfair. And even if I turn the bunny back on, and we currently have our curve basically at 1 second apart, if we run that, even that is a little hard to jump over right at the start. So what we can do is we can go back to our spawn point, and we can use the mouse wheel to zoom out a little bit here, and we can take this curve and push it all the way up to say every 2 seconds. So we're going to start with every 2 seconds, and maybe we'll hold that for a little while, and then we're going to slide right down to maybe every second. All right, let's have a look what that looks like. So that gives me some nice leisurely jumps, gradually getting faster. About halfway through that curve now. If you look at the time up the corner here, which is the score is based on time, and you can see that the cactus are getting closer and closer together. Now, that was a little too easy, because pretty much once I figured out the pattern, I could just gradually speed up my clicking. So what we can do is we can make that curve a little bit more exciting. So as we go to this cactus spawn point, so we start off with 2, and what we can do is we can keep it going fairly sedately, say for the first quarter or so the player gets kind of used to what's going on. And then what we can do is we can add some really sharp dips, but we only want those dips to last for a very short period of time, and that should have the effect of, let's actually not dip quite as much that first time. Let's dip like there, and then we'll dip there, kind of make some kind of more shark fin looking curve, and then gradually we'll dip right down, then we'll go back up. We'll decrease this time in a little bit every time, more shark finny, and oops, somewhere like that. And at the end of the day, let's keep that there, do another one there, drag that, come on, drag that up like that, and then maybe slow it back down for the player, back up to kind of near 2. I think we can add another little dip over there somewhere. I'll just tweak that a little, something like that. So basically it's going to be about every 2 seconds for the first quarter, and then it's going to go up and down and add some variance. And so hopefully we should see little clumps of cacti getting close together every now and then. Firm those up there a bit. So if we turn the bunny off just to see how that looks, we can now play. So we start getting fairly wide ones. It's looking pretty good. Everything's looking pretty good, and then we should hopefully get a little clump of things closer together, and then they spread out again. Yes. Alright, so that's looking better. If we actually try play that, turn the bunny on, let's see what that looks like when we try play. There we are. A little bit of tension there. I'll come back to that. Whoop, and off we go. Yes, I think that's okay. I think perhaps our initial entry point is a bit sedate. It's a bit too easy for those initial ones. So I think what we can do is probably just tweak that curve a little more. If we add, bring that point down there, take this point a little up here. I think we can add our first dip somewhere there. Just a little nudge for the player to start with, and then we can slow it right down again, and then do another dip. Actually, we can probably delete that particular key. Yeah, let's try that. All right, that's working pretty good. We can see we're getting a bit of an ebb and flow, with occasionally some things packed together. And then it's back to slowing down again. Still a tad too easy, I reckon. So what I might do is these points here. Might drop them down a little bit more so that when we hit those patches, the cacti are a little closer together for those drop points. So less than a second apart by the time we get to the bottom there. Let's have a look. Okay. Oops. There we are. It's nice. Just the occasional one that's extra close together. Just making it a little bit trickier. Well, alright, now one of the things you saw there is a double jump. Currently the game lets you jump and then jump again when you're in the air, which is something we do want, but at the moment you could actually do this. You could just keep jumping and your bunny never comes back down. So we'll fix that as the next thing we'll fix. But before we do that, is that we're just going to make one more tweak there. So the thing with the curve is this is, although it's fairly irregular for the player, it's always going to be very, very regular in terms of under the covers. They're actually always going to generate something at the same point in time. So to add a little bit of variety to it, what we can do is we can add just a hint of randomness to this. And the way we can do that is we can go and create ourselves a new public variable, type float, and we're going to call it jitter, and I think I'll make it 0.25, and we'll leave it as public so we can adjust it if we want. And then when we calculate in our next spawn time, we can add to that the random.range, which is a random number that we want to add, and we're going to add a value from minus jitter to jitter. So in this case, with jitter defaulting to 0.25, we're going to add either subtract or add a random value between negative 0.25 and positive 0.25 seconds. So we're just going to shrink or grow the next spawn time by a slight little bit of a quarter of a second, a random amount, or half a second in total potential in total there, but a quarter second either side of where we expected. So that would just add a little bit of variation. It's probably, oh yeah, not quite challenging enough just yet. I think when we fix the double jump problem, that will probably make do. There's one that's pretty close, and there's one that I need to jump. Oh, and there's a third one. Yes, I think that will do nicely. All right, excellent. So now that we have the cactus spawn point being generated off our curve for us and adjust the curve length, we could also, before I move on, I'll just show you, for instance, I'll just turn the bunny off. Because we're using that formula, if we wanted to tweak things, for instance, we could say that we want that whole curve to complete in a 15-second cycle, for instance. And if we ran that, you'll see that it's obviously the entire curve plays out in 15 seconds. So those little jumps and things get a lot closer together. So it's the kind of thing you just want to tweak with and play and decide, you know, how hard or how easy you want your game to be. So I'll leave that back at 30 seconds. If we made it 60, for instance, we would have, and that initial period will be slightly longer, as in we get more cacti over that initial period, but all the periods in the troughs will be a lot longer because we're now spending 60 seconds to complete the entire curve. So if you watch this, you see that the gaps are still quite wide, but when it starts getting close together, it will be closer together longer. But I'm happy to leave it at 30 for the moment. All right, and let's save that. So getting back to our bunny and the double jumps. So in our bunny controller, we currently, if you remember, have a bit of code here that says every time the button up is pressed, or rather button up is released, the jump button is released, then we want to add force in the upwards direction equal to the bunny jump force. And so that pretty much means that if we, every time we press the space bar, we just add, and it means if we press lots, we just keep shooting up in the air, and eventually we come back down, and we can just shoot up in the sky. So we could just keep tapping the button and never come back to Earth. So really what we want to do is count how many times the bunny has jumped, and there he is, and only let him jump twice before having to touch the ground, and then resetting the number of jumps they can do. And that will allow them to do a double jump. So what we'll do is in our bunny controller, we'll add a new private integer, and we're going to call that jumps left, which is the number of jumps we have left, and we're going to set it to 2 initially. And then in the code here where we currently say if the buttons, the jump button's been pressed, then add force, we're going to say if the jump button's been pressed and our jumps left is greater than 0, in other words, we have jumps left, then we can add some force. And if we have added the force, we then want to say jumps left minus minus. So we're going to decrement or reduce the jumps left by 1. Alright, so pretty much the first time jumps left is going to be equal to 2. The first time you jump, it's going to take it down to 1. Next time you jump, it's going to take it down to 0. And then the next time it comes to this code, it's going to say jumps left is not greater than 0. So even if you press the jump button or the space bar, it's not going to actually jump. So that's great. If we left the code like that, however, you'd only ever be able to jump twice and never again. So we need some way to reset the jump. And to do that, we need to know when we hit the ground. So in our onCollision 2D, onCollision into 2D, where we've been checking if we hit the enemies or any object on the layer named enemy, which is how we hit the cacti, we need to have an additional check here to see if we've hit the ground. And before we can do that, however, if we go find our prefab for our grass, we need to add it to a ground layer. So currently it's sitting on the default layer. So if we go and add a layer, and we're going to create a layer called ground, and then we go back to our grass, and we're going to say that the grass is on the ground layer. Excellent. Which means that we can now, in our code, add an extra else here. We say, so if the collider, we can actually copy this bit of code. So if it's equal to the enemy, we do all the logic we had to do before. Otherwise, else. Else if the object we've collided in, so the collisions.colliders.gameObjects.layer is equal to ground, then we want to reset our jumps left. So inside there we say jumps left is equal to 2. So when we hit the ground, we set our number of jumps back to 2. So if we run that, you can see I can press once, twice, and the second time doesn't work until I hit the ground again. So go once, once, twice. It's probably easier if to see this if we just disable the cactus spawner for the moment. jump over this guy. Oops, did I disable the wrong one? Let's just go disable the cactus spawn. Yes, that ought to do. Alright, so I can jump once, I can jump twice. Jump once, jump twice. Third jump doesn't work until I hit the ground again. 1, 2. Right, okay, excellent. Now, the other thing you may have noticed here is that if I jump and then jump again, if I jump twice, I go quite high, jump straight in a row. If I jump once and then wait to fall and then jump again, I only jump a little bit. And that's because in our code, what we've done is when we've jumped, is we've added to the existing force by a certain amount pointing up. However, if the bunny is currently falling down at the time when we jump the second time, the new force we've added is only gets cancelled out by the fact that the bunny is currently falling. So we only get this little jump rather than that kind of big jump. So what we really want to do is we want to be able to, it's not realistic from a physics point of view, but we really want the second jump to have as much force as the first jump did, or at least not be cancelled out by the bunny falling. And so what we can do is we can say inside here, my rigid body, so if the my rigid body velocity dot y is less than 0, then we want to my rigid body dot velocity is equal to vector 2.0. Okay. So what we're going to do here is we check in to see what if the bunny's y velocities, the up-down, is less than 0, in which case means we're falling down. If it's less than 0, then we're going to cancel out any velocity. So that means we're going to ignore the falling velocity. However, if the bunny was on its way up, we would leave that bunny on its way up so that it would add to the current upwards direction, but we're just going to cancel out the falling down. So if we run that now, you can see that when we jump, the second jump, and even if we fall in and we do a second jump, it's still the full force. So it's either like that, or like that, or if we fall in, we still get to a full power jump. Excellent. Now, whilst we want to give them the second jump, it's kind of messy that if they jump twice like that, they disappear right off the screen. So what we probably want to do is have the second jump, although it cancels out in falling velocity, maybe the second jump shouldn't quite be quite as powerful as the first jump. And we can tweak that with a little bit of extra logic inside here. So currently we just add force equal to the bunny jump force. But what we can do is we can tweak that with a bit of an if statement. So we can say if jumps left is equal to 1. In other words, we're doing our second jump. Otherwise, okay. So if the jumps left is equal to 1, so we're on our second jump, then what we want to do is we actually want to reduce this amount by 0.75 f. So we're going to be 3/4 as powerful as the first jump. If jumps left is not equal to 1, then we're going to jump the full force. So if we run that now, we can see we jump, and the second jump is not quite as powerful. We jump and jump. It's just a slightly not quite as powerful jump. Still jump. If you jump fast, you go off the screen, but that's okay. We can handle that because most players will only do a 1 and then a second jump to get over the top, and they no longer can just hold space down and stay in the space forever. So if we turn our cactus spawn point back on, save this all up, and play the game. We should now be able to jump, maybe jump again. And that should help us jump over the cases where the cacti get a little close together, like that one there. Here we are. Ooh, that was close. That was a bit close for comfort there, and whoop, made it. Ooh, panic jump. There we are, now we're doing it. Possibly I'm getting too good at my own game here. Alrighty. And now we've finished our 30-second cycle, so things slow down again. And now things are starting to speed up again. Alright. Oh, and misjudged that one. Cool. And we're done. So, as always, if you like this video, please share it with others. Remember to subscribe to the channel to get notifications when I release new videos. In the next video, we will be finishing up with the special effects or the graphics by adding some parallax scrolling, some things in the background and things along the front, and then we'll be moving on to the sound and implementing a menu system. So as always, thank you for watching.